most people that listen to this show know my voice by now. And
Yes.
if they don't, hi, it's me, it's Dan, and this is Getting Out of the Way. And I have my cousin with me, my dear cousin from the jungles of Costa Rica, decided to make an appearance here on this show. And I'm honored to be sitting across from you, holding space with you. And if you don't mind, take 2 seconds, just let everybody know where you're at, plug whatever you need to plug, and we'll see where this thing goes.
It's an honor to be here and to take the time just to peel together. Yeah, Ed Zaydelman, Brooklyn born Jew, moved to the jungle about 18 years ago to Costa Rica. Been living there ever since and exploring and getting to know myself better through a variety of journeys and adventures.
Amazing. So just to jump right in, I think that, one aspect of your personhood that I really respect and appreciate is the fact that you did take off. You cut the cord. Again, coming from Brooklyn with the upbringing that you had, it's not necessarily the smoothest transition. I'm sure there were bumps along the way, but you made this transition and you spent a lot of time working yourself out, and in a perhaps not so hospitable locale, especially if we compare it to where we grew up. Even though some of us that have seen the jungle and have seen various other areas of the world that really are conducive to this type of work, initially it's like, no, why would I go there? That's not a comfortable place, even though it ends up being probably one of the most comfortable places. But you went out there, and give us just a cliff notes of the 18 years. Like, what's the backstory? If you don't mind, just shed a little light on how those
Yep.
18 years kind of unfolded in 18 minutes, if you could,
Surely.
or less.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it was kind of an uncomfortable leap at first because I was living in New York. I was a nightclub promoter, enjoying a pretty good life at that time. And after college, things stopped having meaning, like throwing parties and drinking. And it was cool to gather community and certain elements that still are who I am today as a people person. But yeah, my life felt like it was missing something at the time, and I didn't know what. So I went to Burning Man, worked at Burning Man, which was really inspirational, and started going on retreats. All sorts of different healers, shamans, business entrepreneurs. That whole world opened to me. And one, as someone who's been a producer and in events his whole life, I was like, this actually feels like it has more meaning in the area that I've worked and dedicated to, providing people experiences. Well, these are experiences of growth and of peeling and of finding yourself. And I had always loved that stuff. My dad gave me Chopra books and Tony Robbins books since I was a kid. So I dove deep into that world of retreats. And at one point, I was ready for a shift. And I know that, my dad left the Soviet Union to come to America. He smelled things were changing. And I'm not one to speak about societal change. I just knew for me, I wanted an adventure. I wanted to see what else was out there, and paused my career at that time and looked at working in this space. And so, long story short, looked all over the world. Where was the place most conducive to my healing, where people go to heal, that feels like a healthy country? Water, freedom. And yeah, started looking at what that kind of freedom meant for me, the shackles of my own mind and the shackles of my physical life, jobs, bosses. I was done with all of it. And also kind of scared because when you take those kind of leaps, money, there's a reason why people stay on the hamster wheel. So it wasn't comfortable. I went through some dark nights and eventually, decided that wanted to dedicate my time to creating a place for people to go through this kind of transformation, and ended up opening a retreat center. And it didn't go as planned. It was not the Swiss Family Robinson story. It was us cooking for group after group, people going from plant medicine to non-plant medicine transformations. And it was inspiring. It was also emotionally draining, ups and downs every week. And eventually hit like the dark night of my soul where it was all too much. And I realized that I was in another eco rat race.
Mm-hmm.
I had left one rat race, but now to build community and to build the future and retreats and healing, it became like a business almost, like another game. And I had to pull out. My marriage fell apart at the time. The business needed to go through major changes. I was done operating a retreat center. But what had happened over all that time and all those ups and downs was very early on, my community took me basically once a quarter, locals, to go do plant medicine. And it was, for me at the time, like a spiritual buffet. I didn't know anything, so I got to sit ayahuasca ceremony and mushrooms and peyote and things that I developed a deep reverence to because they were done with certain principles and respect that even felt like some of my own religious backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
And those took me into the darkest places where I would never go alone and to some of the best expansions I've had. And
Darkest places, externally speaking, or internally?
Internally. Yeah, the places were always very nice. I'm like, ooh, here we are in the jungle. I'm still a city boy, so the mosquitoes bothered me. I'm like, okay, could we do this without the mosquitoes? But yeah, eventually it led me to a second leap in my life, and it was to let go again.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that it would be a series of letting goes that won't ever end, but everything went great once I took my own path and I left the retreat center and realized that it's a constant fine tuning of my alignment to my why, like to get to know myself.
Mm-hmm.
If I do anything in the external world, I just wanted to get to know who I really am and peel and be surrounded by people who are open to do that. Not just high fives and beers, but let's talk about our deep shit. Let's talk about our wounds. Let's talk about family. Let's not feel weird about that. Let's be real. Hey, I'm feeling kind of anxious. Like, what's going on inside of you? Oh, I don't know. Like, da-da-da. Let's explore. And that's what I found in Costa Rica at the end was a community of friends from all over the world and locals who had an open heart and who spoke truth. And I realized that if there was anything I was trying to learn in life at the moment was that. It's just to be open and speak my truth and be present with people.
Right.
So that was my journey, led me till today, which 18 years later, I help people who are opening retreat centers and communities, mostly to figure out their own transitions in life than actually execute massive projects. But yeah, we all just walk each other home, and I learned a lot, and I want to help people in their exploration of it.
It's very important to share our journey along the way openly and honestly, especially as it relates to those kind of core human aspects of self. And in this way, we all kind of grow together. And so you started your process, right? You started to let go, started to peel back all these layers. And based on what was revealed to you through that process, if you could just do me the benefit of a little comparison and contrasting against who you were initially or who you thought you were. What do those two guys kind of look like? Because I grew up, right? Like we grew up in the same circle. So I've seen you over the course of many, many years develop from my young cousin to my peer. So I have one perspective of what that looks like, but I don't have necessarily your perspective. Because these two dudes, to me, they look very, very different.
Yeah.
Even just from the last few years, I see kind of leaps in terms of your just presence, your essence. And I look back at who you were and I'm like, wow, this is almost a brand new human. And for me, since we don't see each other often, it's these kind of huge just jumps. How subtle or pronounced is it from your side of that perspective?
I'll focus on my internal process versus external because obviously externally a lot changed. Focuses on away from just money and making it and things like that to what really matters. But internally, let me actually check in what's going on internally. Yeah. Internally, things became slowly more whole. I think I was acting from two places into separate places, disjointed places. And one was my wounded child. And so that's the child who was seeking validation always from his family. Good Russian boy, good Jewish kid, great grades. It was always about a show, what other people thought. How does Ed look? How am I dressed? How do people perceive me? And sure, parts of it were very positive. It helped me carry myself in a way. but parts of it were completely basing my identity on earning love. And that's because I found that throughout everything that I went through, my core pain points, no matter what the stories were I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. And eventually I'll end up all alone and not loved. You know, as a human, I'm like, oh, this is like what I'm feeling, but this is thousands of years of genetics. Being alone meant death. And so the thing I was feeling was death. To the child, to be unloved, to be unworthy is death. And sure, later I would confront that when I took plant medicine or had huge moments of facing my demons, but I didn't really want to go, and I'm touching my stomach because it's down into the liminal space of that child who got frozen on the staircase of his parents' house when they were arguing. And yeah, from a psychological perspective, years 5 through 7 were programmed with a lot of traumas that get locked in. And what a beautiful journey to start feeling those traumas and nothing to do, nothing to fix, just to feel them. It's not the most pleasant thing to say, like, oh, great, I spent years feeling my trauma. That's what I did. And then I also looked at the other side, which was the fraudulent adult, the ego, the adult that came to protect that little boy. And parts of it were good because I couldn't have lived without it, but parts of it made me the hustler, shyster, not speaking truth, the salesman. And so the fraudulent adult was everyone loves that guy. He's the nightclub promoter. He's high-fiving everyone, has 1,000 friends, but not one real one. He's faking it to make it and scared shitless. And so all of that came to a boil in my life in Costa Rica when I had a project fail. And literally, like, the actual feeling like I did something wrong, and then realizing, fuck, I did. Okay. I had a fantasy. And I didn't see all of my ego's fantasies were actually a very dangerous thing. So when I gave up those two perspectives, I was like, what's left? What's left was me feeling both of those and integrating them to be whole, not to heal, not to fix, but to be fully me with my pain, with my sorrow, with my joy. And so, yeah, if I sit here today and I say, like, how am I different? It's a feeling, so I'm trying to feel it and put it into words. But
I would say, how are you the same? Because I don't see.
well, yeah, I
I
guess.
see completely different, right? So it's like you don't even have to identify it for me because I don't see almost anything of that boy and of that fraudulent
Yeah,
adult.
yeah.
It's at least for me being an observer
Yeah.
within your life. So it would be hard for me to find those common denominators between the man that sits across from me and those previous narratives that were spun.
Yeah.
I guess that's a testament to your effort, and it's beautiful to witness. It really solidifies that transformation is not only possible for each of us, but it's almost a birthright if we allow the process to take us along for the ride, as opposed to, you know, being the doer of things and kind of getting in the way of it and managing and manipulating kind of the process because I think I know better or I think I know where it needs to go.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the times on this podcast, you know, I'll be speaking to folks that are coming out of a plant medicine ceremony or similar, and we're talking about transformation and how, you know, plant medicine is a beautiful tool. It's not the only tool. I'm not going to rank it and say it's the best or worst tool. I'm saying it is a tool that we have at our disposal that could help foster such transformations. It's a tool that allows us to be pointed back inward in an unflinching kind of fashion, right? And it's not the only tool. And I know from your history that it's definitely not the only tool in your toolbox.
Right.
Can you speak to some of the other tools and can you give us a sense of how they fit in within the general scope of healing and how plant medicine is used alongside those other tools, not
Right.
as the driver of it all?
It's a great question. And yeah, I think for me, it's a synergy of tools, like a toolkit or a toolbox, and seeing which ones work for when. You know, plant medicine was a tool I used in a period of my life. Now it's a different period where other tools. So to each his own, first of all. So I think the big things that affected me were Tai Chi practice and energy movement practice for over 15 years. That was something that helped me once I started to learn what my energy was like and what energy is like around me, to start to have a relationship with that energy. my own and that around me, was a very beautiful tool. But I began, because I had a retreat center, I got to see teachers of so many things. So it was like a spiritual buffet for me. I began to taste a little bit of everything to see, whoa, these are 10 different types of breath work and meditation practices. So even to this day, I love getting a really good app like Waking Up for meditation or Othership for breath work. These are things that are such simple tools. And when I met like top trainers of Olympic athletes and other things, I was like, what do you do in the morning? And these routines were like yoga, meditation, a little run, 15 minutes. And I said, where do you get all this stuff? My friend said, YouTube. Just put up Tai Chi on YouTube. You'll have the best playlists. You want to try Qigong? Don't ask 10 friends what's the difference. Just try that, you know? And so the tools that I use to this day that make up kind of my daily ritual, which I'm not as rigid about. I was in like the hyper productivity movement for a while. So this is part of my life. This isn't a means to an ends or in order to be some kind of superhuman. I think these were tools just to feel myself more. So I'll start every day with a piece of the most potent ones, which is meditation, breath work, yoga and stretching. Tai Chi for me is critical, moving the body. And yeah, and then I began to study shamanism and a lot of the energy work, vibrational healing I studied for years. Then I began studying Keto shamanism in a class called Journey of the Shaman. The reason why was I felt like I had always gone to healers and shamans seeking. And this big shift happened where I realized I am my own healer. A lot of people talk about this. It's not like a new topic, but taking it into my own hands, I didn't want to study it to heal other people. I wanted to study it for me. And the Keto shamanism, just as a reference, is the oldest tradition we found on the earth right now and of shamanic practices. It was over 5,000 years old, brought down. And so I said, look, if I'm going to study something and I live in Latin America, this is a good path. And I quickly realized that a lot of the things that I would see shamans do in different kind of ceremonies, from cacao, etc., blessing the four directions, opening up safe space, calling on different power animals and energy for people, like it wasn't some kind of like sorcery. This is actually sitting and feeling energy move through your own body. And it's kind of weird. Like now I'll sit with a client for work and I'm consulting them and coaching them on certain things, and I'll be clearing their energy because I feel a small block. And they're like, what are you doing with your hands? And I forget. And I'm like, holy moly, this has all become part of who I am, as getting to know myself. And it's because I can feel where the pain is in my heart or the pain is in another part of my body, that I could identify it with them. And so, yeah, I think these tools of becoming just more aware and sensitive. None of these things I do take effort. The whole thing of Tai Chi is effortless action. So there are days where I don't feel like practicing a whole list of things. I don't. We were talking earlier that, I just picked up vocal toning, which is big now with breath work and things. I just picked up a musical instrument and started using my voice for 20 minutes in the morning. Never in my life was I drawn to do that. I do it the other day, and man, this heat starts building in my stomach. It's moving up to my heart. I'm feeling an experience of God washing over me, and I'm just breathing and chanting. The level that it can get to, just exploring your own energy and what's going on inside, that was a 20-minute ceremony. And then I can enter the day from that sacred space where everything, like we were talking earlier, everything becomes awe and wonder and ceremony. So all of the tools that I use, I think, are things to help me just feel that awe more. The biggest tool I use is not very common. It's community. I got very fortunate a couple of years ago to join a cool community that did a lot of, it was an experiment in radical exploration of healing through community, not through a teacher. So I joined this experiment that was running for 15 plus years with people of all different race and ethno-demographics and economic demographics. And I dedicate half my free time to this experiment. But it's being deeply present with people a couple hours a day, peeling, getting called out on our shit, pause, what are you feeling? I'm in process, 2-3 hours a day. Work happens outside of that. Now Work has kind of dissolved into one life of healing somehow and sharing. But yeah, that was a choice that was very uncomfortable. Like we sign a contract because as soon as you start, you're like, what did I sign up for? And it's the same thing I've been doing for 18 years, just now with deep structure
Hmm.
that in each other and in presence, like we're doing now, our stuff comes up.
Sure, if we allow it to, right?
Yeah, and
If
then
we're
we
willing
just,
to be vulnerable, right, where the healing happens and where the strength is found, right? If we're willing to give up our blockages in our roles, then yeah, man, just holding space is what it is. It's awesome to hear this, and there are communities springing up kind of all over the place with a similar kind of flavor behind them, because we recognize that you can harness the power of the group in a very meaningful way if we do it without all the bullshit attached to it. Thich Nhat Hanh, before his passing, said that in the future the guru is going to be the group,
yeah,
right? And
the
so
Buddha
here
will be
we
the
are,
center.
right, witnessing that shift in our understanding of what is possible through engaging in strong kind of sense of community that is stripped away of perhaps the Western and in fact even Eastern association with what community means and what a group is, and
Mm.
so it's being kind of slowly redefined right now. And I would point back at you and say, hey, you're kind of actively on the forefront of this shift right now, and so if you can kind of help inform everyone that's listening that perhaps is looking for some type of outlet of a similar capacity but might find themselves in the middle of Brooklyn, New York, or
Yeah.
somewhere else in an urban environment, like how do we integrate it from the jungle? How do we bring it back home? And how do we have a practical conversation about, let's say, representing what community is and what its function should be if we disconnect commerce as the primary driver,
Yeah.
right? Because that's where we're stuck for the moment
Right.
right now.
Or like the wrapper of like, oh, it's a place upstate New York or in Costa Rica with a swimming pool and a Waldorf school.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
How do we bring it home? Like
Yeah.
all the techniques that we use out there, and we mentioned this previously when we were off record. I had a point in my life where I was like, I'm done with all of this, but I'm ready to push the hard stop button basically
Yeah.
and uproot my entire family and go move to the Himalayas because I know I will, kind of be free at that point and
Yeah.
can just work on me, but that's kind of a cheat because
Yes.
then,
Yeah.
anyone could disconnect from their external environment if they force the issue in that way. But it's not practical, it's not meaningful, and frankly, it's not what I would consider kind of integration of the awareness that I had at that moment. I recognize that, it's very appropriate and important for me to do my work in the fire so that way I can kind of show and prove within me where my practice is going and how I am letting go of some of the stuff that I recognize myself to be holding on to. And so you spent 18 years out there.
Yes.
What does it feel like when you come back here? And how do you work with these tools? And furthermore, how do you use them to incorporate greater structures within that community framework?
Yeah. Well, it feels great, first of all, to be back here. A lot of people are like, their dream is to like go somewhere and disappear. Wherever you go, there you are. So I love coming back home. People are like, oh, like America, this, that. I'm like, this is a great country. This is an amazing country. And so is Costa Rica.
Right.
It's about you and what's going on with you and how you're interacting in that. My biggest thing, like, and I stopped talking about communities and eco villages because it's not about building the physical infrastructure. It's about people communing, human to human, integrated cooperation, projects. And I think it's finding a group of peers, could be one. Like I'm part of that group, Leap Forward. They have a website that has so many free resources for how to build and connect to authentic community wherever you are. We'll put the website maybe after leapforward.us. But essentially it's a free organization that I joined dedicated to this. And the thing is to be able to find a person who will speak truth to you and who will reflect truth to you.
Good luck.
And that's hard. It's the hard truth. Someone who will say, hey, I'm dedicated to your growth, so I'll tell you you're drinking too much. I'll tell you about my own problems, let's say with my wife or my girlfriend or whoever, and we could be there with each other, not trying to fix or heal, just
unfiltered.
Yeah, just connecting, because we all have so many masks, me included. And so I discover new ones every day where I'm posturing as this or that, because we forget. We forget that we forgot that we forgot. And so I think our job is to walk each other home, to help us remember. So the things that I like to do are engage in projects with friends, do things, go places, go on adventures, start a company together, do an impact project together, whatever it is. It's not about the company or the profit or the museum you want to open in downtown, wherever. It's just doing things with people because we've become very isolated. And the one thing I love is people. Like, that's why I'm in this thing. Like, the only game in town for me is human evolution. My own, obviously. And that of those I really love. And the group that knows me the closest are not people I live near. We meet on Zoom. They know the deepest, darkest, most difficult things I've went through and remind me that I'm safe. I'm not alone. That might have happened or might be a memory or a trauma, but here today, unless I'm actually getting chased by a lion, which we don't have in Costa Rica, then I'm not really in that level of danger. This is my body responding to it. And so my closest friends will pause me. They'll pause me all the time. Guys, I'm so excited. Da, da, da. Ed, what are you feeling right now? And then I have to go deep and say, what am I actually feeling? And I'm like, whoa, I'm feeling X. Like, I'm really feeling, just like a little bit of not good enough right now. I feel a little guilt about something. Very difficult for Jewish people not to feel guilt. But I had a healer who was like, oh, you're pretty good on your guilt, but you have ancestral guilt to clear. And I was like, I'm done. I'm done with all of this. But no, it is true. So yeah, when I bring that up, that I'm feeling these things, it allows the other person too to see what are they feeling. Like, wow, okay. And then all of a sudden I look across the room and I'm connected to someone heart to heart. It's not like, hey, we're going to movies, we're going to dinner. How was last weekend? Which is good. And we need that small talk. But when can we be connected person to person? One person on a train ride. Like on my way here, closing my notebook and talking to this wonderful woman who lives in Costa Rica. When can I do that again? What gift does she have to share me? And something she said was like the deepest lesson. And you said it earlier, like allowing change. I needed to hear that message. I wouldn't have if I was the old Ed who was in his world, who would be taking notes, preparing for a podcast, thinking about how he wants to show up.
Which is the way we're trained. A lot of the programming tells us to do exactly that. And it's not benefiting us. And I think that society's starting to slowly recognize that. And together we're kind of undoing what was in favor of what is. But taking a step back, so you come back here, right, to an urban environment from the jungle.
Yes.
And you're thrown into a family dinner, which I had the pleasure of being present at.
Great, we're going there. Should we call this the Going There podcast?
It's like, check in with yourself.
Oh,
This
I
is
love
too
it.
uncomfortable. I'll let you run, but just know you're running, right? So it's
let's
me
go
too,
into
me
it.
too, because I share that space with you, and I'm fortunate because thanks to your presence, we had a little greater of a container, so to speak, for the work to happen, and it seems like it did, but. So yeah, man, I find myself kind of alone coming out of meditation, feeling like I'm floating on a cloud and nothing, can touch what's happening. And it's just light and it's beauty and it's great. And then my wife comes home from picking the kids up from school and the drama starts. And right away I get kind of like bent out of shape. And it's like, oh my God, that's my moment to recenter. But ultimately, we do the work on our own, disconnected in a way, but then we have to come back. We have to come back to the kind of fire of the moment, whatever the moment decides to be, however it manifests. So we found ourselves at this family dinner. How did you feel taking your tools on the road from the jungle to the pressure cooker of a family dinner?
Well, let's make first the distinction. It's nice to philosophize about tools that I have and I've learned, but on the court is totally different. Like you're training great in the Himalayas. Now it's time to deploy on the court. And where better than a family dinner? That quote, if you think you're enlightened, spend a week with your family.
Ram Dass, love it. Yes.
So I felt pretty good going in there. I was like, there's a good vibe happening. And then there was this one moment, a comment was made. The comment itself was fine. I feel something going on in my body. And I'm sitting next to you. I feel my own chest get a little tight. I feel like warning signs are going off, I feel your energy. And I even like made a joke too, like, don't take the bait, you know? And I'm like, okay, so this is all happening. Mind you, my tools are out the window because I'm already thinking about the situation. One of my relatives asking a question, which I know will be provocative. No matter what the answer is, it's going to go into a discussion. And can we maintain, given past data, a very high level intelligent discussion without it getting heated, which can happen?
Right.
And so I think I was taken out from the beginning because I'm immediately doing the thing where I'm like, how is that person going to be perceived? Is the person to my left going to take the bait? Am I going to get sucked
Right.
in? And then I started to feel myself as the mediator, trying to like keep the peace. The more I tried to mediate, the more I was like, ooh, this is making it a little worse.
That's right around the time where you left the table.
Yeah. So
And
I,
went outside.
I know that if I don't like, I might not have control or I might not be seeing clearly. I'll physically walk away to take a few breaths and
Sure.
see what's happening because it's about me and me.
Right on.
I could be outside and there's peace and love, and I'm having this turmoil. So for me, it was a lesson between me and me, how I show up. Am I comfortable just to be me? Let someone yell or whatever, even if that didn't happen. And I ended up having a half-hour conversation with a friend's father about meditation for 30 years, you know?
Right.
And I was like, this is amazing. Like, you know, instead of being at a dinner table uncomfortable for a few moments, I found myself and then found myself in my conversation with a guy who's meditated, I'm sorry, since he's 30 years old. I don't know how old he is now, but it's probably been 50.
North of 80.
Okay. And he's telling me that he hasn't gotten far in meditation, you know,
Which is a mental trap, which we could explore later.
but I was
yeah.
like, how funny. Like it left me kind of in awe. One, that the whole situation that happened, for all it's worth, is between me and me
Right.
and how I reacted. And
Meaning you were getting served your medicine at
Yeah.
that time, and it was your kind of process of inner refinement because you disconnected the external and looked inside and
Yeah.
recognized that, hey, this is between me and me, so to speak. It's very easy to get kind of engaged out there and stay out there. Next thing you know, an hour or a day or a week later, you're like, oh, wait, I was doing this internal process and I got
Yeah.
caught out there.
Yeah.
And here I am getting caught by that kind of cyclical thought and process. So you basically were able to disconnect what was happening external to you in that moment, recognize that you were being served, and hey, I'm being served. I have to go outside and close my eyes and let the medicine work and surrender to it.
I guess we should say what was the medicine. I don't want to gloss over it. The medicine for me is if there is an argument, my kid thinks it's his fault.
Yep.
Or it's my duty to somehow keep the peace.
Yep.
Neither of which is true.
Right.
I didn't even have so much of an opinion on the conversation. I tried to say one thing, like it wasn't really received in the speed of how things flowed. But really, my medicine was, hey, this is not my job. Like two people are talking, let them talk. But what's
So the inner kid showed up, but also the fraudulent adult to a degree, right?
I
So
started
they both
to posture.
kind of represented very quickly, right?
Yeah, if I could sit there and be with what is and be with both and not have gone out onto the balcony, that would be really cool. I didn't have at the moment or didn't want the wherewithal to go through that journey.
Right.
I actually wanted to leave, get myself centered. The old me would have grabbed
medicine was too strong, you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay,
The old
got
me
it.
would have grabbed a joint on the balcony or something or a tobacco. I didn't at that moment. It's not that I could go enjoy those later that night or the next day if I wanted to, if that was my
You
desire.
wanted to be present.
But I wanted to be present because I was deeply triggered. And I wasn't even part of the thing. So what a great opportunity to go pause and feel what I'm feeling.
And I want to highlight that because you just identified a trigger as a valuable opportunity to heal and grow. That's huge because we're very caught up with this word or concept of being triggered. And so it's all about how you kind of experience that moment, right? Whether you get upset at that which is pulling the trigger or you recognize that you have a lot of bullets in you and they need to be emptied out because the world's going to do its thing. I might get triggered here and there, right?
Yeah.
So the best way to kind of go about that, logically speaking, is to not have any ammo inside. So you went out there consciously to kind of take a look inside to empty the clip, right? Which is beautiful. And so I love that you kind of framed getting triggered as a very healthy and beneficial portion of that moment.
And by the way, I guess because you mentioned people using tools, one of the tools is I didn't just go outside and look at the moon. It's pause. What am I feeling? So I'll scan my body physically. Even if I don't have it in my head, I'm like, wow, my stomach felt tight. My chest feels hot. I feel a little nervous, anxious. So just going through like, what are the physical realities? The only
You have to be willing to look. So for
Yeah.
everybody listening, right, you have to be willing to look. When this stuff starts coming up, just like in plant medicine, right,
Sure.
when those uncomfortable moments start to kind of rise up, you can't really run from it. Plant medicine forces you into the container, and we make a pact, you know, that for the next 4, 5, 8 hours, whatever it's going to be, we're going to be willing to lean into the discomfort. We're not going to be able to run away from it. But in kind of a practical day-to-day setting, when we're not in a plant medicine ceremony, to the degree we believe we're not, we can run away. We could easily kind of run away. Like you said, there are masking tools, whether it's tobacco, cannabis, whatever it is. There are, you know, various behaviors that we can kind of deploy in the moment to really escape. And technology gives us a really great vehicle for escapism. And so we're prone to do that. Right. But you're basically saying that, hey, you treated this seemingly mundane, non-ceremonial moment as ceremony, and the discomfort rose, and you use those same tools that we use in a plant medicine ceremony of breathing, allowing whatever is to rise up, which is acceptance, recognizing that everything is temporal here. If it's coming, that means it's going to go, so long as I don't preclude it from doing that. And so you leaned into the discomfort, right? You leaned into it, and you kind of started to audit what was happening, energetically speaking. And so the belly felt tight, the chest started to kind of warm up a little, and then take us through that progression. How did that unfold?
Yeah, so physically, then I could be aware of what's happening. I'm present, I know what I'm feeling. And then I do go psychologically and say, okay, what is the story? Once I've been with the feeling enough, and this is why like I do it in a group, because it's hard to stay in that feeling. Me as a mind-heavy person, if I feel chest is tight, belly hurts, I immediately want to fix. But going to look at what's the story, allowing, being with, and very quickly I saw the story. Oh, this is the story of my childhood, or of this, of that. Now, the problem is, even on plant medicine, a lot of times it's like we go on a vacation, like we go on a journey, we see something great. And so how am I taking that now? And so that's why the last part was important for me always, which is when I see what's the story, I finally anchor in what's true. What's true is everything inside is fine. It's not my fault. It's not even wrong. Like, it's actually doesn't, it just is. Right. And so then I can come back to reality and say, okay, well, what about this then? It began and it ended, and I got to feel deeply my discomfort. I see the story, and all I'll do now, the only doing, it's not really even a doing, is I just am aware if that story comes up again, or that feeling, even not in me. Like if my chest is tight, I'm like, whoa, is the person sharing with me, like one of my coaching clients? I know what they're going through. I know, because I know what happens when my chest is tight. And I'm like, what are you nervous about? What burden do you carry on there? Like, open it up. And they're like, how did you know that? I'm like, nothing. I just feel what's the sensations happening in my chest, and I know they're not mine right now. So they're ours. Let's talk about it.
You pointed at a kind of a multi-phase process, right? First, you looked at it somatically, and then you looked at it psychologically. Is the psychological piece necessary, or does it create more of the nonsense, let's say, of trying to understand and trying to kind of segment? And is that beneficial?
I think,
or do we just create space and let it rise up? And when it rises up, it finally has room to pass, meaning I don't have to do anything. There's no actual functionality, right, to working this out. Working it out is the natural order of things. If I could just breathe and create enough spaciousness to not only allow it to rise up, but really kind of lean into it, so to speak, it's going to be on its merry way, because everything is kind of coming and going, right, on this plane. And so the psychological piece, I feel, I don't mean to kind of lead you with the answer. I want to hear what you have to say, but the psychological piece almost is counterproductive for me.
Understood.
personally
Yeah.
and how I see it manifesting with others. I see that we get caught up in the psychological piece of trying to understand it, but it's like, man, this might be so grand. You might never understand it. You're going to spend a lot of energy doing that. Why don't you spend that same exact energy just breathing, creating spaciousness to allow things to pass? Because you know it's going to pass if you stop being so tightly gripped by it. And the psychological piece is a tight grip sometimes, unless we really kind of know how to navigate that plane. Powerful tool, but again, terrible master, right? And it becomes the master very quick as soon as we default to it saying, oh, I am going to figure this out.
Yeah.
And that's another trap all its own.
That's totally, and I appreciate you saying that, because yeah, let's take the first chunk, which is the feeling, right? Pause, what am I feeling? So that alone took me years, right? To really be with my feelings. An exercise I do sometimes an hour a day.
Oh, don't brag. That's just because you're so fast with it. It's not as easy for us to do it in a few years, but carry on.
But yeah, one of the exercises we do in Leap Forward, we'll do an hour of floor time. And my friends are like, what do you mean an hour of floor time? Like you're meditating? And I'm like, no, I'm just laying. And you know, in meditation, you go back to center if you get distracted. Like, oh, just go back to breath. So this, instead of going back to center of breath or etc., you go back to feeling. If you get off on a tangent, what am I feeling? So my biggest thing is to go on deep feeling journeys with breath work, without, doesn't matter, just to spend time with those feelings. I don't think, and I think you nailed one part of it, stories don't help us. Starting to label those feelings, I was a narcissist, I was this. The only thing I do psychologically, and I do it because I have the balance of both, like a container with psychology, spirituality, and people who do plant medicine and others who don't. And so we see the integration part, and it's really not offered so often where the plane can land. And so the only tool of the psychology that I use is in knowing myself, and I've mapped it, I want to know as I'm peeling if I'm not in Groundhog Day mode, that I'm not playing the same movie over. So I stay very short on the mental part. I just do it enough to recognize if there's an old story being looped, and I don't touch it. I don't try to analyze it or fix it or then say, wow, how do I heal my
so
father?
You're basically saying you give it kind of psychological space by recognition, but you won't repeat the narrative, because if you do, you could quickly create the line where the line doesn't
and you
exist.
could get stuck in the narrative,
For
which
sure.
sucks.
And it could, right. And
so I just keep it as a mental checklist. Like that dinner, for example, to bring it to practicality, was, oh, this is the people pleaser and me getting triggered. Cool. I know this story, nothing to do. And actually, the more aware of it I am, energetically, physically, mentally, the more I'm like, cool, not that. You know, because I don't know where I'm going.
Right.
At the end of the day, like, I don't know anything of where I'm going or about this healing process. The only thing that's really helped me is not that.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, I'm not that guy anymore. Cool. I'm not the kid who gets hysterical at dinner, like, stop arguing, everyone.
Right. The saying is like, we learn who we are by experiencing who we are not, right? So we need these, poles to play with to help calibrate us back to center. So, okay, cool. So you kind of explored it from a psychological perspective after the somatic piece, and you were able to just kind of identify it, not ruminate in it, not go into story time, and just create, again, more spaciousness, and then it dissipated? Is that
I mean, just by being with it, the energy dissipated. I enjoyed the rest of the night. I think you did too. I don't know.
Came back into that after a little while.
So it was great. So that's different than it went in the past. Things that would have made me like poopy for 2 days, and I would have woken up all grumpy.
And did you pat yourself on the back immediately when you recognized, right? Because that's another trap. You're like, oh, you did so great. But wait, who's telling me I did great? Oh, man, it's that.
But it's cool. It's cool to feel shift happening in self and family, to acknowledge that, we're evolving. Even those people you think who aren't going to change around you, or you towards an issue, it's like, whoa, today can be different. If I treat it with the respect and awareness of, showing up there with all of me. The real me, being honest, And
the real me is an authentic me that isn't trying to manage to any specific outcome. It's like whatever the moment is, the moment is. And I'm not going to necessarily look down upon myself as to how it may manifest. And that's where we get caught up now. If you're doing that at the dinner table and I'm doing that and everybody else is doing that, then we're not really present. We're not there. And we might be choking down some food, but we're missing the greater kind of ceremonial aspect of that gathering. And so what would it require, for all of us to meet on that plane, heart to heart? Do we have to do our own work fervently until we really get to the place where we're willing to even be with our own heart before we share it with others? Do we all do medicine together? Like, how do we have the next dinner from a more heart-centered place? Like, what's the prescription? Is it a me first? Is it the family, right? Is it an inside-out process? Because the way I see things ultimately is everything is an inside-out process, because we could get very lost in the external manifestation of things thinking that's the thing. Oh, that's what is causing this. But then you flip the dynamic and say, if that is possible, then its polar opposite is possible, because here we are on this relative plane, right, where we know up because we know down, we know hot because we know cold, so we know out because we're trying to learn in. And in this way, we have to go first, so to speak, be the change you seek, as they say, right? So again, just from your kind of perspective, given the tools that you have, given the unique point of view that you bring to the table, the unique puzzle piece that you're bringing to that family dynamic at that table, what would be the prescription for yourself or everyone to have a more harmonious dinner the next time around?
What a tough one. Yeah, I think it would be curiosity. If people were genuinely curious about like what's going on with you, with me, where we can talk. But realistically, I think just to be practical, like how could we come to a dinner like that and then show up in a way or see a situation
similar to the community that you're in? If you were to kind of replicate
that
what's happening
dinner
there, right? Because you're clearly onto something there and it's working, right? How do you bring some element of that back to the dinner table without willful subscription by the people that you're present with?
That's it. If there's no willful subscription, like in that community, we have a set of agreements. We have agreements to speak truth, to not run when someone speaks true to you and you say, F you for telling me that about my partner. I love that person.
Right.
Like we sign a document, that holds us to that, and to be impeccable with our word. And most of those agreements were not honored in that dinner from the get-go, So if you have a group of people that you want to
next time we show up with a contract, is what you're saying?
No, I don't think that's the context
for the appetizer.
I was thinking as you asked the question, would it be fun to like set an intention ahead, maybe a couple of us saying, hey, like let's start the dinner with everyone presencing what they're feeling. As an example, just that one exercise.
And just those of us that subscribe, right? To almost like give them a model of how to do it.
Yeah, and I can say, as an example, I can say like, hey, I'm feeling kind of agitated now. So when I give a jerky answer to a question, you're not wondering why was that so jerky.
Right, it's not you, it's me.
No, Ed woke up agitated with a migraine. It's never you, it's always in me, right? So it's between you and you. So yeah, maybe that would be a fun exercise, because we start each of our group meetings with a presencing of just how we're feeling, and
which is huge, because you give the one kind of element that's going on space to pass before you bring it to the party with you. You know what I mean? It's like almost like a potluck dinner, and you're bringing your anger and agitation to it. It's like, you don't want to bring this ingredient. So the first thing we need to do is we need to see if it's there and then clear it out, and then show up to the party without poisoned water, right?
And maybe that anger is good, by the way. Like maybe one of my relatives is really angry and sad about the situation in Ukraine and says, look, let's not talk about the stupid things we always talk about. Let's talk about something that matters. Here we are, our whole family gathered. There's a war happening. People we know are in it. How are we relating to it? Are we just going to Publix tomorrow or Whole Foods? Are we present to this, or it's just Pilates at 10 and then the kids? Maybe that would be like not an easy convo. It could sound heated, but maybe that would be authentic.
But it also has to be balanced, because you could easily get caught up in the conversation around this external manifestation, which is real, which is happening, which is heavy, but at the same time could be a very big distraction to my own kind of personal process, and the fact that maybe I am holding some, anger or guilt from this morning or from the last lifetime, I don't know.
Yeah.
But finding that little balance, that sweet spot between small talk and meaningful talk, which is challenging. But I like your approach. Like, if a few of us that were, let's say, so oriented can maybe hold space for those of us that aren't, with intention. I don't know. Maybe that's something to be explored before the next dinner.
It's a tough question, because it really is showing up in real life with these things. And I think that's the hard part. Like sometimes we're in these super settings, around a fire with 8 people, but do we take that to how we treat our kids and families, or next day we're, So that's the part I think that's the most exciting to me, is like how we're taking these tools, shamanism, breathwork, plant medicine, whatever medium of learning that someone has, are they taking it onto the court? Do they have a mechanism to check themselves? I know many friends, if they're getting overweight, they'll go to a trainer or they'll do something, but it doesn't have to be a coach or a guru. It could be someone next to you and you say, hey, just like in AA or in other programs, I want to be accountable to you. Like, I'm exercising this week, or I'm this, and so I do think we can't do this alone. When I grew up, I felt like it was the Tony Robbins and the Deepak Chopra and read this book and meditate on this thing. And
Right.
really, like, it's so true. We are walking each other home. We need each other to reflect to each other.
Yeah, and there is no concept such as alone. It's more of a misconception than the greater kind of reality. So we aren't ever alone. We have to sign up.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be willing to go there, meaning willing to open up, willing to, get vulnerable, willing to allow pain and discomfort to rise up and really kind of lean into it instead of kind of oppressing it. And the way we grew up, at least the way I grew up, and I know you probably share some of this kind of indoctrination, is that for our parents who came from the former Soviet Union, they showed up here and the primary focus was to make money and establish some type of economic foundation, because that was precluded from them back there, right?
Yeah.
And whatever we're precluded from becomes kind of our primary goal. So they came here and kind of ran for it. And then when those moments of vulnerability or discomfort would come up, especially from my dad's point of view,
Mm-hmm.
he didn't have a father and he didn't have, any tools of, let's say, practical integration of some of these emotions and feelings. The common response was, suck it up, be a man, and go set a goal. It should have some type of pot of gold at the end. There should be some economic windfall as a result, and just go at it by any means necessary. That was the tool that was handed down because there was no other tool.
Yeah.
There was nothing else to give. So it's not like I'm looking back and saying, oh, I wish he empowered me with different tools. No, I recognize that that's what it was, and this is what it is, and everything's kind of perfect as a result. But perhaps if I had a tool that I wanted to pass down to my child, I can't necessarily claim ignorance of not having other tools. Now I have this whole toolkit, as you put it, and I could deploy any of the tools that are in there. And if I'm going to give him and her the best foundation to work from, it would really be acceptance. And that's what kind of medicine teaches us. It teaches us that you're going to breathe and everything's going to be okay. You're just going to accept the moment the way it is. You're not going to try to push it away or pull it near. You're not going to run from it, because you can't. We try to run within the medicine space to realize that as far as we run, we're going to just run out of energy and it's going to come anyway. We all have to learn this lesson once, but I could at least try to give a shortcut to my kids or anyone listening and say, accept the moment, like accept it fully. Whatever's happening, whatever's rising up, wherever the pressure is, wherever the tension is, accept it so fully that you immerse yourself in it, and it will teach you, not the other way around, and it will be on its merry way. It's just like a messenger. It's here to deliver a message and go.
Just comes with some physical autonomic feelings that might be...
Again, if we put all the cards on the table, then this is part of the preparation for using this tool of acceptance, which is not an easy tool.
Right.
I'm boiling it down to one word, but it's very difficult and challenging. But anyway, I would basically say that, hey, man, acceptance is a powerful tool. Just by allowing what is to be, you will kind of be able to go through it in a much smoother and more efficient fashion. And whatever message is designed to impart on me in that moment will only happen through that acceptance. Because if I reject it, if I push it away, I'm not going to get the message. I'm basically going to either suppress it or repress it or run from it, but I'm not going to get the message. So we lean into it, we accept the moment, and then as soon as we accept the moment, all of a sudden it has a way of kind of transforming into something completely different. It's like the gift wrapping paper is so ugly that I don't want to take the gifts, right? But that would be silly on my part, because I recognize, hey, man, I might not like the wrapping paper, but in there might be something valuable. And so acceptance is just being okay with the wrapping paper being maybe not as beautiful as I wanted it to be.
Yeah.
But ultimately I get through the wrapping paper and there's the gift inside. And so Yeah, acceptance, man. Powerful
I like
tool.
that.
Powerful tool.
I think you used the word allow and accept a lot during this, and those are big themes for me in my
I
life
mean, what choice
today.
do we have,
Yeah.
really? Right? What's the opposite of it?
And by the
Don't
way, that's
allow
where all the cool
it?
shit happens from. When
Right.
we're with the unknown and we're with the possibility and we accept no matter how painful it is and we allow,
Right.
that's where some of the coolest things come from, the unknown, you know? And yeah, I mean, yeah, I think it's the only important thing that if I was to take one takeaway from myself from chatting with you today was to keep reminding myself to allow and to share that vulnerably. Like I write in my newsletter every week, I share the things that I allow and accept in my life, good, bad, and ugly, and others share with me too. And I'm like, amazing. Let's go through it together. Let's not forget, we
Right.
aren't alone.
Right.
So yeah.
Ultimately, it's like the inner child springs up because the inner child's in a state of acceptance all the time until something goes down that makes the heart hurt. And the child quickly doesn't know how to deal with the pain. And then the ego springs forward and says, I will protect you. I'll
Yeah.
guard you from this pain. I will block it. And we don't have other tools at that point in time. So we feel it's very appropriate. And then, the ego kind of, it gets power as a result of that, right? And it kind of shows up on the scene every time something starts to ache or hurt, especially on the heart level, especially when it's from our inner circle. And so the pain happens because we're a child and we're open and we're in this default state of acceptance. But then the ego says, let me protect you. So you don't have to feel this. And we say, okay, fine, you protect me. Now I'm no longer accepting, right? Because as soon as the heart starts to hurt, right away, that defense mechanism springs up. It's one step removed from that in one direction or the other, meaning it's another layer that we create that offsets the ego, or it's the dissolution of the ego to allow us to kind of remain in that state of openness and acceptance as that inner child. And we have to be okay with our heart breaking. We have to be okay with these muscles tearing, because the heart, just like any other muscle, and as anyone who's ever kind of done any physical activity, when you start working a muscle that hasn't been worked before, you tear it. You literally tear it, right? But through that tearing process, it's able to heal and become stronger and bigger, and it's more adept at handling that same level, if not more, of strenuous activity. And so we have to kind of be okay with our heart breaking.
Break it open.
Right? It heals and it's bigger and stronger as a result, and we can handle more as a result, but ultimately we don't preclude it from breaking again. We actually, open our chest up and we're willing to live heart first, because we know that all the breaking it does just means that's all the repairing it's going to do, which means all the strengthening that's going to happen, which means I can handle more and more and more and more and more.
And to be alive, like
Right
Einstein said, like, don't go through this life asleep. To be alive, to have your heart break 1,000 times, to feel, to cry, to laugh. It's what we're here for. Not to drive to the mall on Sundays and this and that. And it all matters.
It's just so easy to get confused, especially when we run from the immediate discomfort of that heartbreaking without recognizing that there's a much greater happening behind that momentary discomfort. And that greater happening forms us and really develops us into a more appropriate version of self, a more harmonized version of self that is able to kind of feel their way through life, as opposed to kind of just mute it all out in favor of one mental concept or another. That tends to be kind of distracting, right? And it's easy to run away when it hurts, man. It's really
That's
easy.
why I like the floor time. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. I
feel about
have
plant
to
medicine,
text
frankly.
somebody. Yeah, and by the way, same as plant medicine, you're often laying on the floor.
Right.
You're not sitting up. You can't fall down. You're fully safe. No
And
matter
there's
where
nowhere
you
to go.
Nowhere to go.
And you're literally opening up a window into all of the pain, all of the discomfort, whether it's immediate or generational, whatever it is. You're literally saying, I'm going to go into the depths of self to not only become aware of this stuff, but to accept it. And then by virtue of acceptance, it passes.
I will say, though, now maybe different than before, there's a lot of integration and anchoring. I have found it very damaging in my own life, having gone to those depths without the appropriate tools to anchor myself. It's almost like how we didn't used to wear seatbelts. And so when I started this whole thing, there was no seatbelts. Now people are talking about preparing before, after. I'm doing journaling exercises, If we're going into that pain, being really sure, because I've had friends divorce wives, quit companies, sell everything. I'm moving to Costa Rica, starting a retreat center. And I'm like, bro, take a deep breath. This is also another extreme. They called
Mhm.
it the pride of life in the Bible, or your eyes open to something and you're like, wow, oh my God. But you also have to take that home. And
Right,
so,
you got to integrate it.
yeah, integrate it. And
That's exactly kind of what happened to me. I went to a retreat and I didn't have any integration tools. They weren't really promoted. It was all about retreat, 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 medicine, medicine, medicine. I go through the process, I come out of it raw and open. I have no integration vehicle, no coach, no guru, no guide, no nothing. And I found myself for a period of 2 years really having a hard time with it. And then after that, I realized I'm like, as I started to understand integration, go through my own process, I realized, oh my God, there are going to be thousands of people, if not eventually tens of thousands, hundreds of
yeah,
thousands, millions of people that are going to go through this and don't have integration tools. So that's why I started to talk about my integration process, which is a private process in a very public fashion. And that was the nature and purpose of this particular podcast, to just integrate my own story and help, let's say, to the degree I can, my process along. And if someone benefits from it, then God bless.
yeah,
That's secondary to the process itself. But this is just one kind of long public integration for me, of me.
it's really an honor to share this stuff with you, and yeah, just have a frank conversation. I share a lot of this in my newsletter once a week, for people taking the leap. It's called Live the Possibility, and it's on livethepossibility.co. It's free, it's fun, and I just share stories of myself and others taking leaps into non-ordinary ways of life.
And all written format. Are you putting voice to it as well? Yeah. Yes.
All written format. Soon
Nice.
there will be some voice
Nice.
after some encouragement. But yeah, right now it's actually a bi-weekly newsletter every 2 weeks, and kind of captures a lot of also what's happening in the regenerative community movement, retreat centers. A lot of my friends who have woken up, quote unquote, from a certain reality, are finding themselves drawn to move not just to Costa Rica, to other countries, other states, into the woods. And so I just help bridge them to that, and yeah, help share.
Resources that people could use that are
Yeah.
available on your website.
Yeah, a lot of practical resources and a lot of stuff about people physically looking to move into the country.
And are you representing that community effort that you mentioned previously? Is that represented on your site as well, or is that kind of you
That's
just point to it?
yeah, that's a separate group. It's called Leap Forward, and their website leapforward.us is amazing. They have a map of being on there that literally maps our internal swamp that we navigate
Mhm.
of emotions. And so there's so many free tools on there. I really encourage people to look at it, because I've never done anything like that that doesn't have money attached to it.
Right.
You always have to pay for coaching, support. The whole point of this was it's not about the money. It's about the people. And
Amazing.
so, yeah, anyone who is thinking about making a big shift in life, I like to slow them down when it comes to building
Sure.
a home, a retreat center. So I really just like to anchor people in their why. And why are they doing all this? Because it could be another escape.
Sure, sure. The hows are easy when the why is there, right?
Yeah,
That was awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much.
that's a pleasure.